I think we can all agree that Yakuza 0 is literally the greatest video game of all time. I mean, what's not to love? The stylish and satisfying combat system, the numerous memorable main and side characters, the completely perfect balance between humorous and serious moments, the over-reliance on hyperbolic, goofy humor, the overly dark story that offers nothing genuinely new to the series lore-wise besides making new players think the villain from Yakuza Kiwami 2 is the pants thief from 0 instead of the other way around? Oh wait, I forgot, I don't like this game. Yeah, that might be a bit of a shock to hear considering how revered Yakuza 0 is for revitalizing the series in the West, and it did do that, don't get me wrong, but this game has really shrunk on me ever since I played it a few years ago. I completely understand why people like this game as much as they do. The humor resonates well with someone whose introduction to this series was hearing about how well the earlier entries did manage that balance between humor and brevity, and the gameplay is very beginner-friendly, with a pretty low skill floor and a very high skill ceiling. On the surface, it is a perfect prequel, a descriptor which I have plenty of problems with, but this is supposed to be a positive video, so I'm not going to bring up those grievances for the moment. I'm going to try to focus instead on talking about how great the beginning of this game is, because it really is great. I'm going to forego my biases and take a look at the opening chapter of Yakuza 0 in some real depth. No discussion on anything past Chapter 1, unless it's for contextual purposes, or I forget that I'm not talking about that. Don't worry, I won't keep you for too terribly long. I'm just tired of white boys with no talent and no autism thinking they have a personality strong enough to carry 20-minute videos, and then all they do is recap something in excessive detail with minimal actual thoughts, opinions, or analyses in the video. Media literacy is dead, and I'm bringing in the goddamn defibrillators. So, let's pretend for a moment that I haven't played through all of the mainline Yakuza games. I put the game into my PS5 because I'm not going to subject you to the PS3 version of the game yet, and I am instantly met with a very powerful aesthetic. The late 80s in Japan could be seen as their roaring 20s from the American perspective, but instead of being caused by the Industrial Revolution finally paying off, this economic boom was instead caused by sudden inflation in real estate assets. That only lasted a few years before violently ending, thus it is known as the Bubble Era. The greater circumstances behind this era aren't something I could explain in less than an hour. That you have to consider that basically everyone outside of Japan is going to have to learn all of this shit in order to understand how powerful the setting they're using in this game is. 1988 Japan may as well be the Edo period for the American audience, and as much as I wish that weren't true, it is. All I did was skim the Wikipedia article for 10 minutes, and apparently Black Monday was a real thing that happened, which was partially responsible for the global recession, as well as the bubble era and the resulting actual, real name, lost decades that one could argue are still happening today in Japan due to their inability to catch a goddamn break. And now all of a sudden Yakuza 3 being so weirdly political might have more depth to it than anybody thought there was? But this is so far off topic that I can't even pretend it's worth forcing into this video any more than I have. Just know that anyone with real estate assets was selling that shit, and there were clearly a fuck ton of people sitting on real estate assets. If you want to know more, do your research. That's the best advice you're going to hear today. It will enhance your experience playing this game so much to learn as much as you can about this time period and this setting. Oh, I was talking too long and now the intro's over. Well, I didn't recognize any of those characters in there because I've played this for the first time, so I will just revel in the fact that I didn't spoil myself on anything. Anyway, here we are, Yakuza 0's main menu. And isn't this something interesting? No. It isn't. It's an alleyway. Kind of weird that they would choose to show us this after that super exciting opening. Oh well. New game, doing legend even though that shouldn't be unlocked yet, and all of a sudden, wanton violence! Guy from the intro's kicking the shit out of this poor dude. Then he steals his wallet. How rude. Also, the game is working overtime to make sure that I know that this, in fact, is the alley from the intro, and that someone does, in fact, own it. Obviously a very important detail. Also, there's a Kamurocho 21st Century redevelopment plan. What the fuck is a Kamurocho? Oh, it appears that this is a Kamurocho. Plenty of hustle and bustle going on around here. If that guy in the alley was like any of these clowns, he probably deserved what he got. And from the way that dude was talking to him in the alley, it sounds like it probably was his fault that he got his ass kicked. Maybe not his wallet stolen, but, you know. Speaking of, man, this guy's a real punk. He sure doesn't sound like one, though. Literally. I mean, he sounds like a full-grown man. Not to mention his frame is absolutely massive, but I'm not sure that that's what he's supposed to be. He looks like an adult playing a kid in a Disney Channel movie. Though, you know, this is a Japanese game, so I guess that might be the protagonist's juices flowing through him. Classic anime stuff. On the subject of juices, that blood on his face. When did that get there? I know that sounds dumb, but think about it. That guy from the alley was never anywhere near his face, and as rough as the dude was, I doubt he hit him hard enough to spray enough blood that far to get on his face. Plus, you know, we probably would have seen that. Well, thankfully, I have an answer. You see, there was exactly one shot during that scene where we see the left side of his face, and lo and behold, the blood is already there. Why did I deem this important enough to bring up? Oh, new cutscene style. That's odd, isn't it? Let's focus on this. Loan Shark pulls up, and the guy hands over the money he took off that dude in the alley. So, I guess that wasn't just a random mugging, it was a debt collection. You wouldn't know it from how they were talking to each other, though. This debt collector, he's a real interesting critter. He says the money that guy brought him spends fine without an envelope, but then he goes on to talk about the importance of image and how other kids the guy's age are... Oh, I guess he is supposed to be a kid. Huh. Well, other things his age are out waving 10G bills at cabs, living the night up, so this kid ought to match their appearances if he fashions himself a real Yakuza. Yeah, if the pin didn't tell you, he runs with the Dojima family. He says collecting on his loans is even more important than the loans themselves. But then he talks about how people are also forgetting the value of money in this day and age, which, you know, yeah, that's some on-the-nose commentary about the bubble era. But then he goes on to offer the kid a chance to work with him, talks about how with money he could shoot his way up the social ladder way faster than he could ever climb the Yakuza ranks. It sort of feels like these were 3 different cutscene ideas they wanted to put in the game, but none of them were long enough on their own, so they just kind of squished them all together and hoped that they would result in a cohesive whole. It doesn't. Now, I do recognize that the Loan Shark himself isn't much of a character on his own, and he's only here to characterize the kid. So, how about we turn our attention to him? If the Loan Shark himself is an interesting critter, then this kid is a downright cryptid. That blood on his face already tells me he doesn't give a shit about how he looks to others. That or he's so used to this kind of lifestyle that he feels like the blood represents him better than money ever could. He doesn't seem that interested in hearing the Loan Shark out on any of his advice, even the actual good advice about money. He turns down a hefty bonus despite being told outright that he's getting stiffed. About the only thing he seems to value is the Yakuza code, as he says outright that once he entered this life he knew he wouldn't be able to leave. Once the Loan Shark takes off, he seems pissed that he had to interact with him in the first place. So, there's our protagonist, a hot-headed monster of a kid who doesn't give a rat's ass about money or appearances, despite placing himself in a situation where he has to value these things in order to rise the ranks. Huh. Makes you wonder why he joined in the first place. Makes you wonder if it makes him wonder, too. Oh, intro part 2, I guess. This one's more about showing the setting of the story, so we'll just call this the spoiler-free version. Gotta say, there's a lot of fan service for a time period in this game, among the more obvious fan service. I know some people have called Yakuza the Japanese GTA, with very little reason, but I would be remiss not to mention that this game essentially serves the same purpose as Vice City, or LA Noire, or even the Mafia game, in terms of fan servicing a time period. So it would be a little hypocritical of me to say that I don't see the purpose of doing this. On a personal note, I'm just not much for fan service in general, but I do understand the value that it can. Cutscene's over. No more personal notes. We gotta find Nishiki. Who the fuck is Nishiki? Oh, now I'm finally in gameplay! That aesthetic experience I was mentioning earlier is coming back in a big way. Every part of this street is perfectly crafted to reinforce everything the game has told us about the bubble era. The sounds of a pachinko parlor off to the left, the neon lights blocking out the stars overhead, the alleyways lining the street, begging you to imagine the horrible things that might be happening inside of them. Thing happening! Thing happening! There's a thing happening in there. And of all the things to make the kid care about what's going on... Wait a second. Oh, I'm stupid. I was going through this whole thing not calling him Kiryu because nobody calls him Kiryu for a while, and I was going to make a big point out of saying that for a prequel, jumping in sort of game, it's odd that nobody says the main character's name for minutes on end, but his name is there. And also his name was in the other weird cutscene. So I'm just dumb. Sorry. Anyway, that mugging over there is the only thing that Kiryu seemed to care about in the whole game so far, besides kicking someone's shit in. But it does reinforce that image of him as a loyal grunt who lives to serve his family. Going out of his way like this is probably the only kind of independence that Dojima character would want from him, if he's the kind of boss I imagine he is anyway. Now, it's high time Kiryu shows these punks off his family's turf. More gameplay happens now. It is a brawler, as you already know. That isn't really the focus of this video. I'm talking more about story and presentation for the moment. I actually do have an idea in the works for comparing the first chapters of every mainline Yakuza game, up to a point anyway. I've got most of the footage recorded, at least, so if anyone wants to see that video, let me know in whatever way you can. I'm currently aware of no ways in which one can tell me this information, but if someone figures a way out, please comment down below. For now, what I will say is that this tutorial sucks as much as any other action game tutorial that interrupts the action with big old text boxes. There are better ways of showing a player how to play. Use them.
Oh. Nishiki.
Oh, looks like this is a Nishiki. Not on screen for more than a minute, and he's apparently more important than Kiryu, the Lone Shark, and everyone else in this game combined. Lord knows why he gets the big title card of all people. That said, I can already tell that opposites are attracting here. The suit, the tucked-in shirt, the way he carries himself, his nonchalant attitude in the face of being blatantly late to their hangout, the fact that he has a car and wants everyone to know it. This guy cares about his image. However, this is a puzzling moment. I'm sure it's just meant to show that at this point in their lives, neither Kiryu nor Akira Nishikiyama of the Dojima family are in the business to help civilians. And the business isn't remotely interested in that either, just to clarify. But it's so deliberately placed here. This guy has no reason to be on screen for any longer than necessary. Kiryu and Nishiki have no reason to give him the stink eye before they leave. They could have easily ignored him. I could gather from the kid's diction that he changes the way he thanks them. He goes from arigato gozaimasu to something more hushed that I can't quite place. Domo on its own is less formal than the former, so maybe he was switching up his language to address them as peers rather than superiors? But I don't think he would do that. Maybe he was implying that they came here to save him rather than being a happy accident of the situation and was correcting that mistake? I mean, that's what happens when your society is built on politeness and different ways of saying the same thing for every situation. More importantly, this moment calls back to what I said earlier about the Japanese audience automatically understanding more about this game than the average Westerner. This isn't a knock against the translation, more just a knock against language barriers, I suppose. Regardless of that, Kiryu and Nishiki exit the situation and get back to wandering around. Their destination is eastward. I have no clue why they're taking the scenic route if they're already late. Oh, it's to dump more exposition onto the player. Great. Apparently these two work under a Kazuma-san, who is currently in jail. Nishiki rehashes the Lone Shark's points about image and substance, but he doubles down on how much more important the former is than the latter. He brings up a good point about Kiryu's fashion, too, that his insistence on not dressing to the nines because his superiors don't is a really bad justification for looking like shit. Once you've built an image for yourself, then you can look however you want, because then people aren't seeing you, they're seeing the man that they've heard you are. When nobody's heard of you, you need to look like someone they should know about. And how do you do that? Money. buy yourself a garish suit, a sports car, a wicked lighter that you could flick out at any instance if your friend hadn't bummed it off you for a week now. Kiryu's retort here is also interesting. Obviously, he's just busting Nishiki's chops, but he's working on the assumption that a man with too much money is happy to give it away. That, combined with his reasoning for dressing modestly, says so much about his character in the scant few lines he's had so far. He believes that somewhere in the Yakuza is a code of honor that everyone respects, and if they don't, then he just ignores that because they're not good Yakuza. But then the fact that he just saved a kid from getting his shit rocked doesn't mean anything compared to beating up some punks in the name of his family. There are some wires crossed in his head, you know? A good person and a good Yakuza are apparently the same thing, but the conditions for each have overlapped in such a way that being one automatically means being the other, even though they're about as opposite as you could get. What especially interests me is his refusal to think about any of that. Neither the Lone Shark nor Nishiki can get him invested in any kind of intellectual banter. He's just not about that scene. The world is the way he sees it, but half the time his eyes are shut. Despite not looking the part, he very much is a child. And I do respect that characterization, even if his appearance doesn't match it. Anyway, now that we're back on the street, we get to listen to Nishiki talk some more. Great. Yeah, shut up. The scenery here really is marvelous. The diversity of establishments really fleshes out this district. On one side of the street, you'll have a massive parlor lit up like a palace. Well, you can only guess what's in there. And then on the other, you've got Johnny the Idiot. Through it all, the streets are packed, and the air is a haze of smoke and neon. I mentioned it earlier, but the sky here is so far from black that I wonder how long it's been since anyone here at night has seen a star. Not that it bothers them, obviously, but still. Kamurocho and its population are just as much of a character as Kiryu or Nishiki is in terms of complexity, but unlike them, it doesn't need to talk about the 80s in order to get its point across. Now we've arrived at Tutorial Part 2. I'm just going to skip over this part, not much happens. Two drunks argue, they encounter some awful accidents, and then they make up. Kiryu beats a white man and learns how to eat money. On a real note, the whole investing in yourself thing is very funny, and for a game set in this time period, tying your personal progress within the game itself to money is a genius decision. We already know there will be a lot of it in the future, so it's good to teach us to spend it early. And now that I think about it, this whole game has been about shoving that message down Kiryu's throat. Spend your money. Wisely, of course, but you gain nothing from letting it burn a hole in your pocket. Good little narrative synchronicity there. Okay, he did not say Kamurocho once in that sentence. I said earlier that I wasn't knocking the translation, but I hope that that's a rare occurrence. I really don't want to have to talk about that in this video on top of everything else I'm talking about. Kiryu also tries very hard to say something of substance here. I'm not sure exactly what he's getting at. It sounds like maybe he's responding to something that Nishiki didn't say, or rather, something that he did say that we didn't get to hear. Either way, he has a point that the draw of Kamurocho is getting shit-faced and passing out after too much sex, but not much beyond that. Stick to the fighting for now, maybe someday you'll have something to say. Speaking of sex, Nishiki shows off a couple of girlies that run up to him out of nowhere, and he gives them some spending cash before they leave. Kiryu, rightfully, asks what's up, so Nishiki drops some more knowledge on him. Apparently, the higher-ups in the family are such chick repellents that showing up with girls on your arm is enough to warrant being given money outright. It's a very strange tactic, but as Nishiki puts it, he's ready to claw his way to the top of the Yakuza by any means necessary. Despite going against everything he believes, Kiryu does acknowledge that he has a point to this strategy. It feels like Nishiki is going out of his way to show Kiryu all the ways in which he's better than him at being a Yakuza. I have yet to see what makes them such good friends, honestly, if they hold such extreme opposing worldviews. Not that they can't be friends despite that, it's just becoming less and less likely that they're too close with each other, Probably more acquaintances in the business. And we have finally reached the karaoke joint. Apparently Nishiki reserved a bottle for himself despite not being a regular. Beyond serving his image, we finally get a concrete hint at some insecurities under that flashy suit. He doesn't want to be taken for a bum. Kiryu fills in the blanks right after. They were orphans, brought in by Kazuma-san to work for the main family instead of living under his wing. So, Nishiki lives large to remind everyone, including himself, that he's a lot more than some poor orphan. Apparently, Kiryu lives in the way that he does in an attempt to pay Kazuma-san back somehow, either by making his life easier in the little ways or by endearing himself to Dojima so that it reflects well on Kazuma. Nishiki, of course having a one-track mind, takes that as Kiryu saying that he wants to rise the ranks by riding Kazuma's coattails, and he says that if Kiryu moves up through that method, then that's just as legit an approach as his own. Ignoring the hyper-focus he has on rising the ranks, it is nice to see some common ground reached between these two. It reminds you that they aren't just friends because the story says so, they genuinely do care about each other. Anyway, it's time for the main event. Karaoke is a very fun minigame that I'm not going to talk about, and you already knew that. However, the night is still young. The boys head over to a ramen joint next, but before they can have their fill, a news report reveals the death of a young businessman. The same one Kiryu just collected from. He's adamant that he didn't beat him to death, but let's just say I could see it either way. God, to imagine he was right there while we were helping those drunkards blow off steam. I wonder if he heard Kiryu coming back. I hope not, that would be a really bad last experience. And no sooner do the boys learn of this than does HQ learn the same, and call them in. Well, Kiryu, specifically. Someone upstairs must have been tuned into the same news channel. Before he goes to report, Nishiki lets Kiryu in on a thought process that I don't think Kiryu is capable of formulating on his own. If Kazuma brought him into the fold, then Kiryu's mistakes are his mistakes. Not only that, him being in jail in the first place is a result of one of the 3 Dojima lieutenants selling him out to the cops. Most likely, he was actually just dumping more exposition on us. I would have liked if they left any of that up to the player to infer, but sure, why not? Positive video. This is a positive video, I swear. Kiryu calls in to guy on phone duty, then takes a cab to HQ. What waits for him inside is a textbook lesson in silent storytelling. Seriously, this shot leapt straight out of a film course textbook. I would know, I was just there. You can tell basically everything you need to know about these characters from this shot alone. On the left is Shibusawa, the Dojima family's money man. Calm, cunning, and calculated. Next to him is Awana, the proverbial face of the family. Social engineer and expert in extortion. Finally, on the other end is Kaze, the muscle for the family. The only one of the 3 who isn't afraid to show off some of his Irezumi. He's the one who called Kiryu in to see them, and the apparent instigator behind Kazuma's incarceration, as Nishiki said earlier. Nobody looks too happy to see the kid. Surprisingly though, they aren't actually too pissed about the murder. They'll need to spend about 10 years in the slammer, but it doesn't sound like anyone else will face repercussions from that. No. The real problem is how to pull the public eye away from the murder site. The venue, as they call it. Weirdly enough, they start acting like Kiryu knows what's going on, or rather, like Kazuma has told him what's going on. It turns out that empty lot is pretty damn important. In fact, it is so important that it's basically the only reason why they're convinced that Kazuma must have been behind the murder. Sort of a strange compliment to his intellect in a way. They ask him why he chose that spot to shake the guy down. Where he got a gun from. Wait, a gun? Well, now we know for certain that Kiryu didn't do it. Not like they'd believe him either way. But that does undercut some of the tension being built here. No, the game is far more focused on telling us that the empty lot is, in fact, important. As they bicker, Kiryu only gets more confused until he eventually reveals that it was the loan shark's idea to have the shakedown happen in that specific alley. After that, Kaze orders the other 2 out of the room, confirming Nishiki's idea that he's probably the one in charge of the 3 of them. Not to mention his spot at the head of the table, but again, more silent storytelling that I do appreciate. Oh, thank God Kiryu kept that lighter. Anyway, Kaze is about to dump more exposition on us. I'm catching a pattern here. Every time things start to get interesting in terms of character development or the plot itself, someone pulls Kiryu aside to explain the story to him. Consequences of being a stupid protagonist, I guess. Honestly, I'm getting a little tired of giving the play-by-play, and I'm sure you're also getting a little impatient, so I'll try to condense this to the interesting parts from now on. There's only one spot in the whole of Kamurocho's Pleasure District that isn't already owned by the Dojima family or a direct competitor, and that's the empty lot where they found the body. The Dojima lieutenants have taken to calling it the empty lot. Dojima himself has ordered its acquisition, and when the boss asks for something, you give it to him on a silver platter. Not to mention you get something pretty valuable in return for your trouble. For the empty lot, he's promised Kazuma a spot in the captain's seat now that he's away in jail, And since Kaze's the one that most likely put him there in the first place, it stands to reason that he's probably the one that was closest to getting that seat before Kiryu went and fucked it up. Before he goes, Kaze gives him an ultimatum. Turn himself in by the end of the day, sans pinky. Classic Yakuza stuff, you understand. So of course Kiryu's next order of business is to get some well-deserved information from that loan shark. If you thought he would even consider turning himself in, you have not been paying attention. I do like that we don't get any scene of Kiryu contemplating the ultimatum. He's not remotely the type to turn himself in for something he didn't do. Much less the type to create a problem for Kazuma and leave it for him to fix while he goes and lounges about in jail. Oh, rush style tutorial. I super don't care at this point, or don't really like rush style anyway. Perfect beginning. Yakuza 0 has a perfect beginning. So Kiryu arrives at the loan shark's office and requests a formal meeting with the man. After some bureaucratic complications, he finally arrives at the top floor. The loan shark realizes that he's outgunned despite being the only one of the two holding a literal firearm, so he surrenders without a fuss. In fact, he surrenders so hard that he skips an exposition dump and goes straight to telling Kiryu that the one who told him to set up the shakedown spot in that alley was... Speak of the devil. Wait, why is he even here? Wait, no, don't tell the president to leave. We can't do this again, no! So apparently Kazuma has one crucial piece of information that's keeping Kaze from acquiring the empty lot for Dojima, and he wants Kiryu to get it out of him. He knows Kiryu is an orphan, and he knows the one thing an orphan in Japan would gladly sell their soul for is a guaranteed future. He spends the whole conversation buttering him up, planting the seeds that would sprout into a big old betrayal tree in the mind of someone with an IQ of at least 100. Yeah, obviously Kiryu turns him down. But for a scant moment, he tries really hard to act like there aren't two neurons in his brain trying to think of something besides Kazuma's nutsack. Holy shit, that's mean. Look, I don't mean to suddenly harp on about Kiryu being a dumbass, but he really is. And under slightly different circumstances that might make for a more compelling story, but he's the type of dumbass that always acts in the most predictable way possible. And the story keeps giving him just enough information to tell him and us exactly what he's about to do. Plus, these scant moments of him trying to wax poetic and failing miserably. Why would he even try? If that introduction with the loan shark taught me anything, it's that he doesn't want to think about shit too hard, to the point that it pisses him off to do so. Or maybe he just didn't really like the loan shark specifically? But he didn't seem to enjoy it when Nishiki goes on about stuff either. It's weird. And he has basically no internal monologue, so I'm inclined to believe that he doesn't do much thinking in the first place. Basically, I'm saying it's a perfect beginning. Kiryu tries to take a break from the plot, but Nishiki calls him over to the Kazuma family office. Dinky little place. And I guess things have gone into a bit of disarray with... Okay, who's slurping their shit so loud? Oh, that's just Kashiwagi. Sorry I got pissy. That is one hell of an introduction, you must admit. And Kashiwagi is one hell of a sub-boss for Kazuma. He's running the office in Kazuma's absence, and he's blessed us with the penultimate character introduction scene that's actually interesting. For one, he apparently knows all about the situation that Kiryu's in, which means he and Nishiki are either oblivious, or Kashiwagi is a good listener. For two, oh for fuck's sake, it's an exposition dump. Everything he's saying could have been arrived at from a simple inference given all of the previous information that we have gathered over the course of this chapter. Of course the lieutenants are buying up the land on Dojima's orders. Of course the reason the empty lot matters is because it's sitting in the middle of the land, preventing Dojima from being able to develop or sell it as a full package. The plot is probably the difference between selling it for millions of yen or selling it for trillions. Why do we need to have that completely spelled out for us? Obviously the key piece of information Kazuma knows about the owner is either who or where they are. How is that even a question? Did Kaze say those specific words so that we could get this half-hearted rumination on what this so-called key info could possibly be? But don't worry guys, even if Kazuma's going to kill himself because Kaze will kick him out of the Yakuza, Kiryu's got a plan to make sure that that doesn't happen. It's his responsibility alone to fix this, despite it being neither his fault nor his problem. He's gonna do that thing that he told the guy earlier that he can't do, rendering that character moment into stupid foreshadowing, my favorite kind of storytelling. But he's not gonna ask Kaze permission to leave, that would be stupid. The man hates his guts, and also he doesn't have the authority to do that anyway. Nope, he's going straight to the top. Which, hey, we don't know anything about Dojima yet. Maybe he'll hear him out. Maybe I was wrong about that assumption about him earlier. But I have a sneaking suspicion that this plan only sounds plausible to us because we know as much as Kiryu, which is nothing. Either way, we're back in good storytelling territory. Very happy with this scene. Kiryu's resolve is shown here better than anywhere else. His friend is begging him not to serve himself up to the man who he's disobeyed twice, and the best Kiryu has in a retort is a shove and a weak excuse. He gives the same shit to Kashiwagi, but he's quick to remind Kiryu that they are not peers, that he doesn't get to talk to him that way. Kiryu's just as quick to remind him who he's talking to. A dunce. He doesn't give a shit if the guy he's trying to sacrifice himself for tells him to stop. If he's convinced it'll help, then he's gonna do it. Kashiwagi makes a big show out of playing the tough boss, but it's nothing more than an act. It's why he's second in command. He's a decent enough boss when he needs to be. He commands respect, isn't afraid to dish out punishment, has enough savvy and know-how to understand his place in the Dojima family, but he's not Kazuma, and he knows it. And I think Kiryu knows it too. That's why he's not listening to him. Look at that forced grimace. He's trying to scare Kiryu into submission when he already knows he's lost in the battle of willpower. That bow says a lot on Kiryu's end. It isn't like he doesn't respect him. I don't mean to imply that. But Kashiwagi's face after Kiryu moves around him really sells that scene for me. He softens, just for a moment. He's watching what may as well be his nephew step straight into the oven and ask him to shut the door behind him. I think this scene endeared him a lot to most people who played the game. I hope so, at least. It very much endeared him to me. Anyway, Kiryu's off. Shut up, Nishiki. Oh shit. Wait, there's only 2 of them in this scene! No! Kiryu does the exposition himself this time. It's 5 a.m. as I write this. Believe me when I say that this isn't anything important. Smaller Kiryu is sad because orphans don't get no respect, no dream and privileges for them, no siree Bob. Can you tell it was 5 a.m. when I wrote that? Okay, I guess I probably should actually give a little synopsis of that scene. This one's coming just from memory, so I apologize if it's a little spotty. Kiryu is upset because he and Nishiki asked to join the Yakuza. Kazuma, whacked him with his cane or something. And then Kiryu gets all, whiny on him because he wants to dream. This is Yakuza. He wants to dream real bad, and not having a dream makes him sad. And somehow that was enough to endear him to Kazuma to the point where he was inducted the next day. Remember that, kids. Whining will get you anything you want, as long as you do it hard enough and blame it on the fact that you're with him. So I guess Kiryu thinks he owes it to Kazuma that he let them into the fold at all because he was acting like a little brat. So now he has to be the perfect Yakuza to make up for it. Except his perfect Yakuza only exists in his head. And now he's throwing all of that away on a moment's notice because he thinks it'll help the situation that could very easily be resolved by just going to jail, you know? Not that that's an easy thing to do, but surely this situation can be solved in a much easier way than what he's got in store. If he doesn't immediately get the snot kicked out of him when he arrives, I'm going to flip my shit. Oh, that's refreshing. Thank God someone's listening. Oh, never mind. Anyway, Kiryu's grand strategy was to ask to speak to the manager until somebody lets him. Obviously nobody does because this isn't an after-school program. It's the Yakuza, as Kaze very eloquently puts it. I'm honestly surprised that Kiryu doesn't at least offer to cut off his finger. If he doesn't want to reflect poorly on Kazuma, then shouldn't he go about this expulsion, retirement, whatever it is, in the most peaceful way possible? Who does it help to make an enemy out of the entire Dojima family on the night you want to leave without leaving any trace of yourself in the business? See, this is what I mean when I say he's a complete moron. And not only does he follow through on the most poorly thought out plan of all time when far better and less painful options exist, he somehow manages to bring Kaze down to his level by using the oldest trick in the book. This allows Kiryu to tap into his corny anime dialogue and power up into protagonist mode. Kaze, embarrassed by this utter failure on his part, leaves to compose himself before he starts crying, which leaves Kiryu to find his way to the manager's office by himself.
覚悟はいいな。いつでもいいぜ。来い!
Even this long battle is a little odd. It's a good fight, don't get me wrong, super cinematic, but it isn't the first long battle in the game. That fight in the Loan Shark's office came first, and it even used the same music. It really neuters the epicness of this moment by spoiling the track. It's called Tusk, speaking of. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but the first minute does go pretty crazy. It's just a little bit too repetitive for my taste. Fortunately, this battle lasts just long enough to where it doesn't become outright annoying. Kiryu moves up one floor at a time, makes a pit stop in the restroom, and definitely kills that guy. He is dead. I am playing this game for the first time, and he is dead, because if he's not dead, then this is the stupidest thing of all time. But Yakuza is so good because the story is stupid and bad, but it's taking itself seriously, and it's not like the stories used to actually be good, normal style, instead of shitty soap operas that take themselves way too seriously. Kaze, shirt gone, Enma tattoo, Judge of Hell. Watch Goku Doni's video explaining the tattoos, it's really good. Okay, I got some sleep. I'm willing to admit that the fight is great. And I mean that. The build-up is also really good. The way his theme builds during the cutscene is epic. He's done spouting bullshit about his ideologies and the plot, and he's just moved on to talking about how bad he's gonna kick Kiryu's ass. This I can get behind. Hopefully. Come on, stay still, you son of a... The one more detail I really like before this fight ends. Look at their auras. You see how much more defined Kaze's is? That has like actual tendrils coming off it. It looks like an actual flame. While Kiryu's looks more like the center of a fire that hasn't gotten quite enough fuel to burn at full brightness. I don't really like how the aura looks in this game, but I very much appreciate the symbolism of the aura in this game. It makes the bosses feel that little bit more daunting by outright showing you how much more of a badass they are. After we're finished with him, the other two lieutenants walk in. Kiryu's more than ready to throw hands with them too, which is also a really good moment, but this whole cutscene is a good moment. Now it's time for our final great character introduction.
Dojima. Kumicho.
I hope he caught a really long commercial break. Dojima doesn't cut Kaze any slack. He absolutely lays into the guy. And Kiryu doesn't catch a break either. You can tell how exasperated he is with the situation. He's like if the principal got called into a classroom because a kid picked a fight with a substitute teacher and not only got the fight, but won. Another great detail. These two snitched on Kaze, but they weren't in the room with him when he gave the order to off Kiryu. This either means that they were listening in on that conversation from just outside, or Kaze told them that that was his plan while he was busy trying not to cry. Or, and this is my favorite option, they heard about a maniac kid rampaging through HQ, put two and two together, and told Dojima that Kaze was trying and failing to kill a child without permission from the boss, hoping that that was close enough to the truth that they could give a more complete story when they got Dojima to get off his ass and fix the problem. This line from Shibusawa gives me hope that this is what happened, and I do hope that this is what happened, because that is hilarious. Either way, Dojima isn't tolerating anything coming out of Kaze that's not blood. And honestly, I'm tempted to just let this play out, so I will. Nothing I say could top the experience that is watching this cutscene. So keep your eyes off the subtitles, or at least don't let them stay there for too long. Take all of this in. This is the real purpose of this video. It's just take everything in.
Sa, 兄弟。久世剣能界の人間なら作法は知っていますよね。兄貴の好きなけじめです。男、見せてください。よく見とけや。
God, that's amazing. And now that that's over, Dojima asks Kiryu the most pertinent question of the evening. What did he think this would accomplish? I'd like to think Kiryu is floundering here. Either that or he thinks a massive gesture of some sort would somehow prove his innocence through demonstration of his character, I guess. It's nice to see that Dojima recognizes how stupid of a trail of logic that is, regardless of how Kiryu arrived at this conclusion. And he tells him, straight up, that this isn't his problem anymore. If someone else had managed this, then he would actually be in a pretty good situation now. Because yeah, he's out of the Yakuza. For some reason, Dojima's just going to let that happen, even though I'm pretty sure that if he wanted to, he could just say, you know, Kaze doesn't get to do that. But I don't know, maybe he's as tired of this as I am. But yeah, Kiryu is out. He gets to return to normalcy before spending too long in the Yakuza, and money is easy enough to make right now that he could probably make a nice cash cushion for himself before the bubble pops. But he doesn't. Instead, in a moment of epiphany, Kiryu realizes that he has officially become the stupidest thing in the entire known universe, and this makes him very sad. Dojima gives him some pats and sends him on his way, while Shibusawa and Awano try not to laugh as they leave the room. Oh, now see, this is poetry. See, Kiryu joined the Yakuza in the rain, and now he's leaving the Yakuza in the rain. I think that this is just like Blade Runner. And just as all hope seems lost, a strange Chinese man comes in to usher Kiryu into the next chapter of his story. And with it begins the downward spiral of quality, blah, 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 blah. That's what I wanted to say, anyway. That's what I was building towards with this whole video. I wanted to point out how great the story begins and talk up how great of a first impression that this game makes on the player, but as I kept writing, I kept realizing that my problems with this game's story don't begin in Chapter 2. They're here. You've seen that they're here, or at least you've heard me talk about how my problems are here. They're just overshadowed by the actual good moments of this chapter. The character introductions, the differences between Kiryu and Nishiki's philosophies on life, the beginnings of the rivalry between Kiryu and Kaze. There's a lot of good here. There's even some great, but every time they start tapping into that good stuff, someone pulls Kiryu aside to explain some part of the plot to him and the player, or Kiryu's pulling in the most predictable stunts imaginable for the worst reasons imaginable, and getting pissed off when they don't work. However, as I've been trying to remind myself during the construction of this video, I do want this to remain positive. So I'm not going to end this video disparaging Yakuza 0 fans, aka the entire population of the world, because I've seen how hostile the response is to Yakuza hate. That, and I love this series. I want to make that abundantly clear. No matter how negative I've come off towards this game, that doesn't change the fact that it was my first, and it will always hold a special place in my heart for introducing me to my favorite series of all time. Maybe. Depends on what day of the week it is. What I will say instead is that I absolutely see why this game hooked so many people when it got popular. The well-written characters, the interesting relationships between them, the beginnings of an interesting conspiracy in the making, even if it is told in a pretty ham-fisted way, the incredible world building with both words and the actual overworld, the experience of living this time period, not to mention the gameplay itself, not that I talked about it, but it's good. It's really good. Nearly every part of this first chapter is expertly constructed to draw you into the characters and the world that they inhabit. And even if they don't interest you, the game is quick to provide several different gameplay samples to entice you to enter this world and find something that does interest you. So, yeah, that's the perfect beginning of Yakuza 0. Look, if you didn't know going in that it wouldn't actually be perfect, then I do apologize, but trust me, you're better off having watched this than getting conned by those morons that'll title a video something like, Why Yakuza 0 is the perfect prequel, or How Yakuza 0 Saved My Marriage, or some other clickbait bullshit. Yeah, at least I pretended that it was perfect for a little while. I need to cut myself off here before I get pissy again, but yeah, Yakuza 0. Perfect beginning. Pretty good beginning. I like it a lot. If you liked the video, that makes me really happy. Please let me know if you liked the video, so that I can actually feel that happiness, and so that I know to make more videos. If you have any suggestions for more videos, then wish with all your might, and maybe someday you will see it. That's all. Bye-bye.
ほなさいなら。ってアホかいな。わしがたぶらかされてどないすんねや。